Hello, hello. Welcome back to Roo Career Radio, the podcast when we talk all things career. My name is Allison Murdoch.
And I'm Tessa Pranat.
And today's podcast is all about strategies for virtual networking. We have coerced our manager of employer relations and outreach, Erin Christensen, to help us really dig into best practices for connecting with your network and employers. Before we start talking about virtual networking, let's go over our usual housekeeping. Career services at UMKC will remain virtual for at least a few more months, but until further notice, we will offer appointments, workshops, career fairs, and any other service virtually. For a list of all upcoming events hosted by our office or many of our reputable employers, check Handshake. There are a lot of really cool events happening right now. As a reminder, all of our new grads and alumni will still have full access to our services, so feel free to reach out to us anytime via email at careerservices@umkc.edu.
I am really excited about today's episode. So next up, we're going to be picking Erin's brain about virtual networking and best practices, so don't go away.
All right, so back to what you're here for. We know networking can be scary during any normal circumstance, but this pandemic has really thrown us quite the twist. Now we have to figure out how to not only network, but network solely virtually. As a career coach, I have been hearing one consistent question from our recent graduates. I've been applying and looking for jobs or internships, and I haven't found anything concrete yet. I'm worried, but what else can I do? No doubt these are uncertain times, but one thing you will always have around you is people. Even if it's virtually, people are still your best resource for finding your next great opportunity. We are creatures that tend to flock together. We thrive on connecting with other humans. Use this.
You know, networking is just so important. And I know that we talk about this all the time, and I think it's the thing that people want us to recommend the least. But I was recently in an advisory meeting here at UMKC, and it was the HR leaders of some of the biggest and most interesting companies here in Kansas City. And as we were wrapping up that meeting, we asked them, so what should we be advising our students about, what they should be doing, what's important in these strange times? And the immediate and emphatic response from just about everybody in that room was, tell them that networking is more important than ever. And really, it's a numbers game. When you think about it, when the job market currently, or even when it starts picking up a bit more, there's going to be a lot of people applying for one open position or just a handful of positions. So how do you stand out? And if a company has to decide out of the 1,000 people who applied, who is the 6 or 8 people we're going to bring in for a phone interview, chances are good that those 6 to 8 people will be people who have some sort of a connection. And it doesn't even have to be a very strong connection, but some connection to somebody within the company. And that's why networking is so important right now, is that a quick conversation with somebody, setting up an informational interview for half an hour can be that connection that helps you get the job. So to talk about networking and how to do it and why it's important and how to get started and all of that, we're going to bring in Erin. Erin Christensen is my colleague. I've been working with her for about 5 years, and she knows a lot about this. Basically, her job is networking all day long. So Erin, I know a lot about you, but our listeners may not know much about you or who you are or what you do. Can you give us a brief introduction of you?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Like Allison and Tess said, I manage employer relations for the Bloch Career Center. And really what that means is anything employer related funnels through me. So career fairs, on-campus interviews, connecting employers to faculty, to speak in classes. I coordinate all of that and manage those relationships. My career has always been in higher education. Before this, I worked at a school in Nebraska doing more student involvement and leadership development. And I also worked in admissions. And, the common thread, even though I'm doing something very different than when I first started out, the common thread though is relationship building and the power that has when developing your career. And I would say that that's probably one of my biggest strengths. And I also graduated in 2008, which many of you might remember. That was when we had a fairly large recession. And so the power of networking was important then. It's much easier now because everything can be done virtually. In 2008, there weren't as many opportunities to do virtual networking. And so I feel like I have a fairly good grasp on how to manage this time in your life, but then also talk about networking either in person or virtually. So I'm excited to kind of share some tips and tricks that I've learned over a few years.
Yay. And we're really so happy that you're here to talk with us about this. So guys, this is actually a question for both of you, because both of you actually really have really good knowledge about networking and virtual networking in general. Where do students and alumni start if they want to begin networking virtually? I mean, is it really that different from in-person networking?
I would say yes and no. First, the nice thing about virtual networking is that if you're more introverted or you're more hesitant to have that conversation with someone in person, you don't have to do that. You can, shoot an email, create a LinkedIn message, everything is done virtually. And then maybe you can move into the next step of doing like a Zoom chat with someone, or as things are starting to open back up, meeting them from coffee or whatever it might be. So it is different in that regard, but it's not different in trying to set up that initial first meeting and that first communication that you're having with someone. And typically that is, if you didn't meet someone at an event, that is going to be done virtually anyway. So as we were working with students, even pre-COVID, we would coach students on how to draft that first initial LinkedIn message or email. So that hasn't changed as much when working with students regarding virtual networking. But I would say the biggest tool and piece of advice I could give students is LinkedIn will be your best friend. It goes for much further than being able to apply for jobs and setting up a good profile. The alumni feature on LinkedIn for students from any university is awesome. You can filter it. There are so many different filters that you can use for LinkedIn. If you're a student that's in Kansas City and you're studying marketing, but you want to be in New York, you can filter what UMKC alums are in New York working in marketing, got the same degree as I did, and then you can draft that initial message. And I would say you'll have a better response rate if you're reaching out to an alum than if you weren't also, because you have that automatic initial commonality. Even before COVID, and more so even now, will always be your best friend when trying to establish a network in a virtual space.
As part of that too, I think it's important to develop your own LinkedIn profile when you're looking to do some networking. It's a great place to find alumni, but it's also a great place to say a little bit about yourself, something that maybe is not a resume you can direct somebody to. Yeah, I love LinkedIn also. So Erin, walk us through the process a little bit, because I hear this from students all the time is, I don't know how to network. I'm afraid to do this. I don't know how to get started. So let's say I've been on LinkedIn, I've gone to the alumni page of my university, and I found somebody at an organization that I think is interesting, and it looks like their job's interesting, and I want to reach out. What do I do? What do I say?
Yeah, so there are, I think, two different approaches a student can take. If you find a job, for example, on LinkedIn, a lot of times it will have the person that posted the job, and typically that's a recruiter. Recruiters are the ones who are really boots on the ground on campus as well. So that is certainly one route a student can take when identifying someone to reach out to. But another route a student can take is also identifying people who are in that same job at that company and reaching out to them just to start that initial network and even provide job shadow or informational interviewing opportunities. So recruiters are the ones who, build their relationships on campus and are the first stop into the company. So it's really great to have that relationship. But I think also building their relationships with individuals who work, in that same role that a student might be interested in is just as valuable, because a lot of companies have employee referral programs as well. And so and recruiters typically can't be part of that because they meet so many different candidates. So, building relationships with people or individuals in the job that you want to do is just as important as working with a recruiter. So after you've identified who you want to, initially message and build that relationship with, then it's drafting the message, which I think for some sounds easier than it actually is. You don't want it to be too long. You want, that first initial line to catch their eye. So if you're an alum, that's a great first initial line, or that's a great subject line. Like finding something that connects as the student to the individual that you're wanting to connect with is important for that subject line or that first initial line. And then kind of like an elevator pitch. So you explain, I'm a senior at UMKC studying marketing, and I noticed that you posted this position with XYZ organization. Would you have a chance to chat about it in the next couple of weeks? And then you go from there. So I would say don't make it too wordy because no one wants to read. I've gotten those sponsored LinkedIn messages that are paragraphs and paragraphs long, and I just delete them, to be honest with you. So you don't want it to be too wordy, but you want it to be just enough that catches their eye. And then from there, you might have some email exchanges, and I always provide my email address as well in case that's an easier form of communication for that individual. I always say, if it's easier to email, feel free to reach me at, my email. And then from there, you can hopefully set up a Zoom chat or even a phone call. And then again, like I said, as things are starting to open back up, offering to take them out to coffee or even doing a job shadow in their office as well.
So Erin, in your experience, and I know you've talked to lots of employers, lots of alumni, lots of professionals in a wide range of different types of jobs, how receptive do you feel that most people would be to hearing from a student that they don't know?
Yeah, I would say overall very receptive, especially recruiters. That's their job. Every recruiter that I've talked to, that shows that a student's a go-getter, that they are taking that extra step to build that relationship, and recruiters understand that. So recruiters are very receptive to those messages. I would say alumni and the folks that are in the roles that you're interested in as well are fairly receptive also. What I've chatted with students about also is don't get discouraged if someone doesn't message you back within a day or two. Recruiters are on LinkedIn pretty often, probably multiple times a day. Other folks aren't necessarily. If they don't really need it to do their job, they're not on it or they're not as active. And so sometimes their response rate might be longer. So I've reached out to individuals that we've needed for different panels or different events. And sometimes it takes at least a week to hear from them because they're just not using the tool as much as others would be. So I would say for the most part, everyone has been receptive, even when I've had to send a cold message to. And sometimes they just don't have the time, and that's okay. They'll always message me back and, say, thanks for reaching out. I just truly don't have the time to do this event, but feel free to reach out in the future. So I would say 99% of the time, recruiters and other folks within that organization would be receptive to chatting with the student.
Yeah, and that's really been my experience also. And I also, really the worst case scenario is they don't respond.
Right.
And really, I can live with that. I can go on if somebody doesn't respond to my sort of cold call email. They're not going to write back and say, "Who the heck are you and why are you bugging me?" If they don't want to talk to you, they simply won't respond.
Right, and
that's okay.
Yeah, and then move on. And find someone else that you can reach out to. And that's the nice thing about doing it virtually is that you can have a whole slew, like a list of individuals that you can reach out to. Whereas if you were at an event, you might have one person from that organization, you might get their business card. So So yeah, just move down the list and find some other individuals, and then also use our office as well to, if you know you want to work at a company and you saw a job posted, but you're not quite finding who you are wanting to find on LinkedIn, or you don't really know where to start, that's where we come into play, and we can absolutely help you make those connections. I work on a daily basis with coaching team and asking for, names at different organizations that we can connect students to. And so it's just because I don't work as directly with students doesn't mean I'm not providing those resources to support students through their job search and networking.
So talk to your career center.
Yes, so talk to us.
That's always the moral of our story for every one of these. It's like, go talk to the career center.
I promise we're helpful. So.
Though, as much as we love LinkedIn, and we do love LinkedIn, they should really give us some sort of royalty check or something like that. But they don't.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But there are other ways to connect with employers. One of the ones that I like to recommend to students is follow up with people who speak in your class. How easy is that? They've already shown an interest in communicating and connecting to the university. So make sure you jot down their name at the end of a class, whether it's virtual or in person. Introduce yourself, write in the chat box, thanks so much for coming in and speaking. I really enjoyed what you had to say about X, Y, or Z. And then get on LinkedIn, because again, I love LinkedIn. Look them up, see if you can connect with them on LinkedIn, and just an easy way to keep in touch. And sometimes keeping in touch is so simple. A lot of times these people will post something on LinkedIn, maybe something about their company, something that's going on, and you give it a thumbs up. You can write in the comment box, such an interesting perspective, thanks so much for sharing. And it's just a little tiny way of kind of reinforcing that you met them, that you value what they had to say, that you're interested in them. And that's what network is. Yep. It's not a huge, scary thing, but there's all sorts of other ways too to meet with professionals, young professionals, seasoned professionals out in the community. And I know, Erin, you've been involved with the Kansas City Area Development Council and other organizations. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So outside of, LinkedIn's great. That will probably be our biggest recommendation. But like Tess said, there are a lot of other ways, specifically within the community that you live in. I've been involved with the KCADC, the Kansas City Area Development Council, for a while now, and they have events that are sometimes specifically targeted towards employers, but then also for job seekers. And those are great professional development opportunities. So as you're meeting other people within that participated in that event, you can more than likely get an email list of those who attended, and then shoot them an email if you wanted to have a follow-up conversation. A good example of this was I did an event with the KCADC back in April. So everyone was still working virtually. And after the event, I got an email from someone that was in our breakout room through Zoom, just asking for more information about UMKC. And so that's a great example of how participating in those events, even though they're not specifically networking events, are a great way to build that network and to learn more about what's going on in the market that you're wanting to live in, but then also hear from employers or other individuals about, what the future looks like for their companies. So the KCADC and then also Chamber of Commerce, they usually have, before COVID, they had these really awesome neighborhood networking events that were great. And most of the time they were free. And I'm almost positive those have been moved to virtual as well. So those are good opportunities also. Tess and I actually just had a conversation with our alumni association folks about doing some work with our young alumni groups at UMKC, and they really want to be involved with students through different mentor opportunities and volunteer opportunities. So finding ways to connect with young alumni is important, and one of those ways is through a mentor program. I know at least within the Bloch School, we've had a variety of mentor programs through our office, and that will continue in a more robust way this coming year. Those are great ways to network also. So go beyond what the event is called. So it doesn't have to be a networking event to start building the network. There are a lot of different opportunities to learn more about an organization and to meet people. And I would also say a shout out for Handshake as well. There are events from employers that are posted in there all the time for companies that aren't necessarily even in Kansas City. And a good example of one is McKinsey. So for those who aren't familiar, McKinsey is one of the big three consulting firms, and they are very selective with the schools that they recruit from. Well, they had an event that was open to pretty much all schools within Handshake. That is a rarity for students at the majority of schools to have that much of a deep dive into an organization like McKinsey. So why not take advantage of it? Those employers are using those events as kind of early recruitment opportunities for the organization to diversify the students that they're hiring. And so just because an event might not necessarily be sponsored from our office, we're approving those events, they're vetted, and they're virtual. And so it doesn't hurt for you to check out those events if they're with organizations that you're interested in or in cities that you might be interested in relocating to someday.
So the moral of the story really is don't be afraid to reach out and connect with others. Be curious about people that you meet and what they do, and really build that professional network. Talk to your organizations, your school's career center, of course. Ask about the different platforms that they might have that can facilitate networking, be it Handshake, or we're actually implementing a new system called Wiser that we'll be launching this fall, which will be helping students build up mentorship and networking opportunities with alumni and community members. And of course, get on LinkedIn.
That is it for this episode. We hope you gained some motivation and confidence to get out there and start networking virtually. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and our YouTube channel, UMKC Career Channel. We also have a LinkedIn group any student, alum, or employer can join to post positions and get updated on valuable career prep info. As always, if you have any questions or have any ideas or topics that you'd like for us to discuss, send us an email at careerservices@umkc.edu. Our next episode will be Summer is Not Over. So we will discuss how you can still get involved this summer, build those experiences, and how you can prepare for the semester to come. You have been listening to Roo Career Radio, brought to you by UMKC Career Services and the Bloch Career Center. We'll talk soon.